right? I guess that's what we do. Oh well, we're all learning today. Okay, here we go. Influence. So let's start by asking a question. What's the difference in your mind between power, influence, and manipulation?
Manipulation always seems like a negative word to me.
I agree.
Influence is where you feel like you can change something, and power is something that people possess but might not be able to do anything with. Don't know.
Mhm. I like that. Elena.
Yeah, I think kind of following on what Claire said, I feel like power is the ability to make someone do something, whereas influence is the ability to make them want to do something, but the action is very much kind of on them, whereas manipulation feels like the negative side or the danger of influence. If it feels kind of like it's based on either something that is untrue or controlling, whereas influence doesn't have those connotations.
Okay, like it. Thank you. Any other comments, observations?
Power and influence to me suggests that you can still work with people, obviously influence being probably more on a even footing perhaps, or you upwards. Manipulation to me comes across as more you're doing something to someone to get something you want and they might not realize it, so you're not approaching them in a way that you would if you had power in a conversation or were in an influencing conversation.
Yes. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because influence, when I think Claire was saying and Elaine as well, the person might not know you're influencing them, which is similar to maybe the manipulation bit. So I sort of, when I think about this, I don't have an answer, by the way. It's more to just get us thinking. I think they're really close, probably too close for comfort at times. So I think about, I think the description of power is you have the power to make someone do something or think something that otherwise they might not have done, right? So it's not necessarily that they're having that choice in that. And then influence, I would say it's the same, but you just don't, you're not making them do it. You're um helping them make that choice or make that change through influencing them. So it's a little bit more indirect, perhaps I would use, which is kind of exactly what manipulation is. For me, the difference is manipulation is when you are getting someone to think, feel, or do something when actually not only is there no benefit to them, it's probably bad for them. So it's the intent and the impact on the person. Whereas I think with influencing, you might be getting people to think or do or feel something, but from a place of good intent. Like it's, you know, they have a benefit, other people have a benefit. Manipulation, I feel like there's only one person that benefits, and that's usually the person doing the manipulation. So to Claire's opening remark, I don't think you could ever have positive connotations around manipulation. Like it's negative because it is something someone does to someone or other people for their own gain only. That's my take on it. Kim.
Do you think that the more influence somebody has, the more power it grows? So, in terms of internal communications, the more you influence people and they see the outputs, they see what comes off the back of it, and they think, oh, actually, yeah, I trust. The trust starts to build with your opinion. The more your power over the situation or the meeting or the outcome or whatever it might be grows as well.
Yeah, I think power and influence, I think all three are really closely connected. Like I think there's that and power and influence definitely. So with power, there's a the classic power reference is French and Raven, and they talk about I want to say 5 different power sources. And I really should have included this in the slide, but let's see if I can remember. The first one is legitimate power, as in I have authority. I'm your manager, I'm a policeman, I have legitimate authority power. The second one, these aren't in order, is knowledge. Okay, so I have knowledge, like I'm knowledgeable in what I do. Sometimes that's called expert power. The third one is resources. So I have resources like money or people or stuff. I've got stuff, I've got resources. The fourth one is reward. I am able to reward you. So carrot, as in, that isn't necessarily monetary rewards, but I can reward you through, I don't know, pay, promotion, praise, stuff. And then the fifth one is coercive, which is the stick to the carrot. So I can punish you. They're my 5 power sources. So if you think about that in the context of an organization, oh my God, is there 6? I think there's 6, likability as well. I will definitely look this up and I'll come back to you all, but broadly, they're the power sources. If you think about this as an organization, if you're in internal communication, really, hey, Haley, really, your power centers around knowledge expertise. If you have that knowledge and expertise, which you all do, but I would argue that power is only applicable if people recognize and respect your knowledge and expertise. And in today's world, expertise, I don't think are valued as much as they used to be. Everyone's an expert. It's why we're in some of the messes that we're in the world of society, but that's another chat. You rarely can reward people. You rarely can punish people. You might have resources. So then the other one is likability. Like actually, if people like you, you can probably get them to do things you want them to do. So the one that you're talking about there, Kim, would be expertise, right? Actually proving your expertise to the organization. Which kind of brings me on to the next slide. So when should you influence? And there's 2 schools of thought of this. And the first one is, well, when you don't have power available, that's when you go to influence. So actually, you start with power, one of the power sources I spoke about. But if you don't have that, then you go to influence. And I would argue if you take that view, actually, as a IC pro in an organization, you probably need to rely on influence more than you do power. But the other school of thought is that you should do it even if you have power available. And if you think about this, a CEO in an organization has a lot of power. Hire, fire, pay, like all of those, they have so much power plus legitimate authority. But what do you think that does to communication, culture, and engagement if they just rely on power? Open question, reflections.
You basically end up with it feeling a bit like a dictatorship and you're just always being told what to do. But then I feel like with influence, you want to be clear about why you're asking people to do it, which doesn't really fit with just power where you're just telling people you need to do this thing. But with influence, you're explaining like this is why you need to do the thing. So you want to try and explain that as well so that people understand and they can join you on the journey rather than feeling like they're just being dragged on the journey.
Lovely explanation. Thank you. Yes. Any builds? No? Okay. So The other school of thought is you start with influence, and then if you need to, you use your power. For the reasons you've just explained, Tamsin, I think this is where most of the best leaders operate. What I see though with what I see with a lot of CEOs or senior people is they prefer influence over power until they realize that that takes a little bit longer to get people to do and think and feel the stuff they want them to. And then they get frustrated and go to power. And that's even a bit more dangerous because that's when, for me, the influence that they tried looks a bit more like manipulation and they've just given up and gone to power. This is just some of my experience, but these are like the two different lenses. Um, there are three sources, but the sources on the right, you can see there's like four people and they're slightly different, but broadly. How do you influence? So Cialdini, who does a lot, is super well known in the influence space, basically talks about understanding human behaviors and leveraging those and appealing to those. Quirk, and we're not going to cover a lot of quirk stuff today because I would imagine most of us are quirked out at the moment on the advanced diploma. But his thing is fix other people's problems. So always be in their space, meet them in their space, meet them with their problems, fix their problems for them. I think that works to a degree, but I think we've almost covered that in all our comm strategy work and what have you. So I won't cover that too much. And then you've got, God, I don't even know if I'm going to say these names properly. Musselwhite and Plouffe or Plouffe, I don't know. And then Williams and Miller. And they talk about understanding how people like to be influenced and then using that particular way of influencing to influence that person. So their argument is everyone has a preferred way of being influenced, and you need to understand that before you start influencing. So these are like the three. Well, we're going to cover the left and the right one. We're not going to cover quirk. Okay, so let's have a look. Sorry, I'm moving my video around the screen where I can see your faces, but also see my slide. This is a disaster without you, Stella. I hope you're watching this when you're feeling better. I realize how much we need you. So these are Cialdini's three, four, five, six human behaviors. So he talks about liking, reciprocity, like giving someone to get something back, social proof, consistency, authority, and scarcity. Okay, I'm not going to go through the slide with it, but the argument is if you pull one of more of these levers, they're so linked to human behavior and psychology, you are likely to get the outcome you want to get. Now, what you can see, if you look at liking, for example, people like those who like them, that's pretty true. So he argues that you should uncover similarities and also use genuine praise. Okay, so you might turn up to your meeting with your CEO or whoever, okay, and they've got a cat and you've got a cat, and you build on things like I love cats. What's your cat's name? Oh, your children go to that school. My children go to that school. You support that football team. I support that football team. Did you see? What do people watch now? EastEnders? Is that still a thing? Like, did you see EastEnders? No, I didn't see EastEnders, or whatever it is to watch. Right. So it's that. And then you've got the other ones as well as you go down there. So you sort of like you give to get. You sort of social proof, so you show what other people are doing or what other people think and feel. Um, Consistency is about getting someone to make their commitments public. So you are then forcing them to be consistent with what they've said. That's why it's called consistency. And then you've got the expert thing around authority. And then scarcity is about things that are difficult to get or lost. There was loads of studies done. I'll dig this out at some point as well. That shows that if people people will take decisions more on the fear of losing something than they will of gaining something. And I think I think it was done with something like like you could win £5 or lose £5. And actually, would you press the button? And more people would press the button to avoid losing the £5 than they would to win the £5. So something around people are more worried about losing stuff or things that are difficult to get hold of than they are of gaining things. What do you think is the darker side of this, though? Because at the moment, this all, yeah, okay, that makes sense. What's the darker side? When does this start slipping into the manipulation area?
I think it's when you're not being clear about your intentions or when you're trying to get people to act in a way that isn't good for them.
Yep, Elena.
I think that it, even if you think it's good for them, they might not think it is. So I think that even if you think it's in their benefit, it doesn't necessarily mean that kind of the influencing, depending on which of these methods you choose, is in the clear. I think in any of these, especially the more you know someone, the more you can manipulate different aspects to play on their insecurities or needs or strengths. So I think that even if it does carry the risk, that even if you think it's in their benefit, that doesn't mean that you are still steering on influencing instead of manipulating.
Yeah. Any other comments or criticisms of Cialdini's? Do you see these things in action in your organization? And if so, which ones do you see more of?
Guess as well, it's not situational, so it doesn't take into consideration the situation that you're trying to influence on.
Excellent criticism, thank you. Would you be comfortable using all of these?
I think for me, they feel quite fake. If you're putting on a like a mask or a persona to go and do something, how long can you keep that mask up to then continue that conversation or whatever, the longevity is of that ask or that influence of them? That surely you want to be genuine and have genuine relationships with these people rather than, I don't know. That's what I can see that, and I can think of examples of where I've seen it all happen. But people can read through all of that as well. So surely you want some genuine connection and yeah, just genuine connection really to use your influence in that way. That's my thought.
I think it's I love it as a thought, Hayley, because I think you're in this very difficult position in internal comms where you need to get people to do things, right? Or you need to get leaders to sign stuff off or, be part of the comms or support things or change it. You need to do all those things. And then because it would be very, very weird, it would be very unlikely that you have a lot of power, as in you could get people to do it. You have to go to influence. And then to your point, it's a bit like, well, all of these, I think, could be faked. And actually, I can't, Elena, I want to say it was you, but I can't remember. So apologies if it wasn't. There was one of you I had a really good discussion with when we were doing the technology thing about how easy it would be now to use technology to sort of create it was you, Ellen, was it? Create an influencing plan using some of these things, right? So Haley, let's say I joined you in your organization, and I sort of pumped in your LinkedIn and your socials and whatever into my AI, and I pumped in KLD, and I was like, create me an influence plan. I rock up on my first day with you, and I'm like, so how the kids, and you're like, how do you know all this? And it's like, okay, I guess the argument for that is you can shortcut and speed up all of that relationship building that could take weeks, months, to get. But is it ever genuine or authentic? No. And then I don't know. Like, I don't know the impact that has on the other person if it's not genuine. Like, I think if anything, they'd read through it and then everything's just a game at work. And I think, Claire, did you talk about the work persona? You're never really your real self in work, right? In that, yeah. And then you just create this whole like fake thing. So a lot of criticism of Cialdini, and I'm not sure this is what he intended, was that a lot of this starts edging into that manipulation world. However, they are useful theories to understand. So Musselwhite, I'm going to say Plouffe because I think Plouffe sounds better than Plouffe. Musselwhite and Plouffe actually talk about, well, what you really have to do is understand how the person prefers to be influenced. So this might come back to when you've just spoken about like intent and being a bit more upfront and intentful. And actually, maybe the conversation is how do you prefer to be influenced? Because we all know we're trying to influence each other every day. Let's not pretend and do the dancey round sort of thing. And actually, I turn up and, I'm meeting Simon and I know Simon, I don't know, supports Arsenal, and I turn up with my Arsenal hat and like I mirror Simon's body language and all of that, like I do, sort of your sales technique. Why wouldn't you just sit down and say, well, how do you like to make decisions? What's your style? So, these were boiled down to five different styles. So, is it someone who's more in that rational space? So facts and logic. Is it someone where it's more about authority? Someone who prefers sort of meeting halfway, so it's all about compromise. Someone that's more visionary, inspiring, or someone that is about trust and connections and people. Um, so you could sit and ask, and you could even use this and say, where are you? Or you could watch to see how those people influence other people, and then you could sort of guess, well, not guess, sorry, but work out where they are on this. Because the argument made by the authors is also that people tend to influence other people how they like to be influenced. Yeah. So if you're watching someone and they're very, big picture and it's inspiring and it's all about vision and purpose, then probably they prefer to be influenced in that inspiring category. What's the danger of that assumption? Leanne.
Is my mic working now?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I guess the danger is that you're basing it on your belief system and what you want and not what the audience needs are and what they want. So I think you can pigeonhole yourself and just not have the success rate that you're expecting because you're just thinking about yourself.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to think that's how I like to be influenced, therefore everyone must like to be influenced that way. Claire.
It's also very personalized. So it's going to take a lot of time to do this with individuals rather than groups of people as well. So for the leader that's going to have to influence, they're going to be quite they're going to have to take a lot of time to understand individuals at this level to make sure that they personalize it to get to the right place. So it'll take a lot of time, would be my observation for this one.
Excellent point. So if your CEO was sitting you down saying, we really need to get people on board with what we're doing with this change program, and your audience is 3,000 people, where do you even start? Okay, that's back to audience mapping, stakeholder mapping, but God, it becomes tricky to scale it, right? Elena.
I feel like this one might be slightly unpopular, to be honest, but I'm just kind of considering it if, especially with someone who's very senior as CEO, sometimes there isn't room for compromise. Sometimes the answer is the answer, and especially if it's strategic changes or decisions that have been made. And I understand asserting is there, and you want to do all these things, you want to inspire as well, but I was just specifically thinking with rationalizing and negotiating, not at all saying we shouldn't do all of these things, but sometimes you can try to negotiate all you want and the answer is still the same. And so it's almost a better use of people's time to just be straight up and say, this is what's happening, this is why. But I understand that doesn't really fit within kind of more empathetic listening.
No, but this is why I push you to criticize and challenge it, right? Because it's a theory on a page and you go, oh yeah, okay, I could see how all of those things work, but how does it work in practice? Or how do you understand what someone's preference is? And also, you know, I can think of a lot of senior people I've worked with, whereas if I put this slide up, they would say, well, I make decisions based on, I'm very rational in my thinking, Chris. I make decisions on data and facts and rational. And I know they don't. Like, I know they don't. I know they're much more emotional. So there's a bit about, do you sit and ask them? And also, how does that conversation even play out? And to Claire's point, yeah, okay, if you're only managing a couple of people, but if you're saying like, I want to influence, I want to be able to influence you more effectively, let's talk about how you like to be influenced. Is everyone going to be, yeah, okay, let's have that chat? Or are they going to feel like, well, hold on, why are you trying to do this to me? Because again, it goes back to like, it's very close to some of the darker arts of human behavior. So I think there's some useful stuff, but be careful would be my thing. So, and if you think about influencing, again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get someone to think or feel or do something, right, that they might not otherwise do for the good of themselves or other people. So actually, Williams and Miller, who I put in that third bucket because it's very, very similar, but it is slightly different because they talk more about decision making. So what they talk about is again the different styles of decision making. So there's people who are maybe a bit more charismatic, and the thinkers, the skeptics, the followers, the controllers. And what they say is you can spot these people. Again, I would challenge that. You could sit and ask these people. Again, I don't think that's straightforward. How do you scale it? Back to your point, Claire. And then you need to adapt your style to get the best outcome and the decision you might need. So I don't know if you were going to present to the board, and the decision maker in the board was charismatic. What they say is, you know, try to keep the conversation on track and don't get swept up in their excitement. Or things around skeptics. Actually, you need credibility. Now, credibility might take a while to build, okay? So in that example, they talk about going and borrowing credibility. So getting a sponsor or getting someone else in that room who has more credibility with the decision maker than perhaps you do to help you get that decision through and get that person to make the decision you want them to make. Again, even as I say that out loud, make the decision you want them to make. It all gets very close and messy in that power, influence, manipulation, what is now a blob at this point. Okay. And that's why I think I love this topic, but I'm always like, oh, it's such an uncomfortable topic. And you're so close to that line of like tipping over into ethical, moral things. As you read this, comments, questions, concerns about this model, what they're saying is identify the person, adapt your style to that person's needs. And if you think about the previous slides I've also shown you, that argument is consistent with these authors, right? So actually, they're all saying you need to adapt your style based on the person. And then I think one of you criticized the critique was about situation as well. Well, what about the situation? Some situations might need more, big picture vision. Some situations might need more data. Comments, questions, concerns, criticisms? Liam.
I'm going to say quite often, at least in my organisation, we don't talk one-on-one. It's like usually in a group setting. So if you've got a group of diverse people and they have different styles, how can you adapt to meet all of their needs? That doesn't work in practice. So you'd have to find a common ground that would work for the majority or works to fit your style as well, I think.
It's a brilliant thought. And I visualize it as almost like the one-man band where you're going in and you've got the guitar, the harmonica. Like, how do you even do that? And actually you draw out another quite important point here. I'm a massive advocate of diversity and inclusion in teams. I think the benefit for organizations is huge. It makes communication super, super, super more difficult. Because imagine if I was talking to a room full of Chris's, like it's not a great thing to imagine, but if I'm sat and I'm talking to 5 other Chris's, we have the same meanings attached to the same words. We get each other. We speak the same language, not literally, like once you start adding that diversity in and people think differently and act differently and have different preferences for how to be influenced, different preferences for how to receive communication, that's another reason our jobs are so difficult. And in that example, Leanne, the only advice I can give you is if you're going into meetings where there's, 6, 7, 10 stakeholders, meeting them all individually way beforehand and giving them one-to-one personal time and adapting it for their style there is really time consuming, but probably the best way to approach it because you're spot on. Hold on. So I go into a meeting and I've got to think about how to get the people who are more charismatic. Oh, but I can't leave out the thinkers with all the data. God, what about the people that need, all the sort of like, social proof around that? Oh, what was that other thing Cialdini said? Oh, yeah, authoritarian. Your presentation just becomes like 4 hours long. So you're right. Again, who's the key decision maker, like understanding in that group is maybe where you would then put more of your effort into. But you're right, Leanne, like it makes it exceptionally difficult to like put these theories into practice, perfectly. I feel like that's been a lesson throughout the diploma, actually. Yeah. Any other comments on this one? Okay. So, two of my favorite books, not for reading now, for reading once you've handed in your portfolio, if you wanted to, is Thinking Fast and Slow and The Political Brain. And their argument is forget everything else. As long as people will make decisions, people do not make decisions in a rational, data-led way. That people make decisions on emotions. Always, everything is an emotion. People are emotional creatures and they make decisions based on emotions. And not to shortcut their arguments, because I wouldn't be doing the books a service. If I like something, I'll go with it. It's all about how I feel about it. And then, I couldn't find the people who said this, but these are two quotes that really stick with me. If it feels good, it feels true. It's really difficult for the brain to distinguish between what is true and what just feels true and feels good. And again, if you look in, you just have to look at the world around you. Oh God, I mean, there's a whole different debate about what is the truth, but that's definitely not for today's call. Messages that are very simple and not complex and don't make me have to think, I tend to accept them as the truth. Like people will tend to accept them as the truth. Like the lack of critical thinking is alarming. And then the other one is people like people who are like them. Again, we sort of covered this a little bit, and it starts slipping into that sort of darker side of things. I think if you can find genuine and authentic common ground with people that you can connect with them on a personal level, that for me is in the influencing. My opinion, this is, by the way, there's no source or theory. My opinion is that sits in the influence bucket, not in the manipulation bucket. It's when you start creating false connections that personally I'm uncomfortable with. Questions, feedback, comments, concerns, anything at all about this? This is a very short little dip into influence. If you start, you can obviously read up on these sources once you've done your portfolio, and you'll go into a lot of rabbit holes. Claire?
Yeah, I guess this is more just kind of in general. It's, like people who like people who are like them, and it's when it's they're not expecting anything in return as well. It's that mutual kind of, I'll do this, but I'm not going to be thinking, well, what's in it for me kind of thing.
Yeah, and that was one of Cialdini's things, wasn't it? Like oh my God, the one I can't say. Reciprocal, like if you're doing something for someone just to get something back, I don't know. I feel that's a bit, you're
That's
keeping
is
you're
it?
keeping a tab, right?
Yeah.
Well, I did that for you. Oh, it's like, well, then you didn't really do it for me. You did it for yourself, and that for me is when it starts slipping more into the manipulation. So yeah, I agree with you. Anything else? Okay. Useful, interesting as a topic. Bit scary. Darker side. The other thing I would say is where I think these models are really useful is recognizing when someone is trying to influence you and then, understanding their intent. That's another useful way of doing it. Cool. Okay. Oh, sorry, Leanne, I didn't see the chat. Yeah, I need to rejoin. Okay, yeah, I agree. There is that. You're right. There's an element of, yeah, back to that control of why are they doing it, and there's that horrible darker side. Um, cool. Okay, so if you have got me drafts in,